Good evening, Jane Reith.
Good evening, Home Secretary.
It is a pleasure to see you back in my press bunker.
I wish I could say it was a pleasure to be back.
But I thought you enjoyed our previous brief encounter.
You are not Lavrentiy Beria, and this is not Moscow. Your undercover officers should not be allowed to abduct journalists in London for your personal edification.
Parliament has given me so much discretionary power to authorise undercover law-breaking in the public interest that I don't know what to do with it all.
Caesar's dilemma. How is this in the public interest?
Margaret Thatcher believed that we should elect potentates and submit to their will for the duration of a parliament. The public interest is a euphemism for the convenience of increasingly powerful ministers in the digital era. I can brief you here, off the record, with plausible deniability for us both, to avoid political and professional embarrassment resulting from future inquiries.
Brief me about what?
My strategic plan for the in-out referendum on membership of the European Union. Would you like to hear what I have to say?
I'm a political correspondent for the BBC.
In that case, you know what to do. I want you to support my campaign to remain within the European Union.
You must know that the BBC is strictly impartial. We cannot be seen to endorse or favour the arguments of one side over the other, and we certainly can't become an instrument of Project Fear.
So you claim, but in the game of politics no one can be completely impartial. Everyone has their own agenda, including the executive and editorial management of the BBC.
What agenda is that?
On the issue of the referendum, we share a common goal, to remain within Europe. Eurosceptics have the journalists on Sky News working for them, and so you must provide balance to the overall coverage.
The ethos of the BBC may be broadly pro-EU, but you have a long-standing reputation for being a Eurosceptic. Why are you campaigning for a vote to remain within Europe?
Membership has its benefits. As Home Secretary, I can have people arrested from anywhere across the continent for extradition to the UK, using European arrest warrants.
But you have similar arrangements with other countries, like the United States, which have absolutely nothing to do with EU membership.
We can ship British people off to America, thanks to one of Tony Blair's dodgy deals. But unlike Europe, the US Constitution doesn't allow its citizens to be extradited without due process of law.
Extradition processes between EU states are comparable to those between the individual states of the USA, and the European Court can provide a check on the more extreme populist whims of the House of Commons, in the manner of the US Supreme Court.
In theory. But in practice, I always get what I want in the end, no matter what the European Court or the Liberal Democrats have to say.
So you have been proselytised by the EU's convenient policing and security arrangements.
It's not just about policing. There are strategic global issues to consider. A British exit, or Brexit, could be the catalyst for further schisms in the European Union. No one wants to see a return of nationalist rivalries, or divide-and-conquer Russian influence infiltrating from the east.
Surely the economic conditions for conflict in Europe no longer exist. The Kaiser and the Tsar, Hitler and Stalin, each created their armies from peasant populations who owned little or no private property. The affluent and educated German and Russian middle classes have far too much to lose now by following militarist leaders like Teutonic robots or even the good soldier Schweik.
At the turn of the 20th century, pan-European war was considered unthinkable because the London Stock Exchange would collapse. But the war went ahead anyway. Jackboots may be history, but the EU is essentially three disparate blocks of nations: the Mediterranean, the North, and the East. Splits along these political fault lines or fissures may occur at any time, which Germany or Russia could exploit in pursuit of an economic hegemony.
Britain is an island trading nation. Once a significant exporter of manufactured goods, but now offering financial services and luxury London apartments to wealthy overseas investors. Why do we need costly EU membership?
Most of our manufactured goods are sold to Europe.
But we import much more than we export, so can negotiate favourable trade terms and regain control of our agriculture and fisheries.
Perhaps. Although much of the UK's current manufacturing base was created by overseas corporations wanting access to the European single market. Leaving the EU could cause a surge in unemployment if manufacturing jobs are transferred to the continent, and a massive loss of investment in commercial property. The uncertainty of a Brexit would certainly destabilise financial markets for quite a while. There could be a serious run on sterling, which would require interest rates to rise and banks to foreclose on the vital buy-to-let market.
Have you authorised public interest surveillance operations to protect the country from leading Eurosceptics, who are causing uncertainty in the buy-to-let market, such as the chairman of the Public Administration Committee?
The Home Office has a policy of not commenting on surveillance operations so that we never have to reveal who our targets are, although the sinister Mr. Jenkin would be a prime candidate for our attention.
We learned recently that Eurosceptics in the Cabinet have had their access to government documents restricted. They must know that they are the targets of security service surveillance authorised by the Home Office.
All public figures enjoy a degree of surveillance for their own security.
Big Brother watches over them?
Exactly.
What if he were to haul you before his committee and compel you to answer questions about surveillance operations conducted against his colleagues?
He wouldn't dare. It is not within the remit of his committee to ask such questions. Only the Intelligence and Security Committee can do that, and they are all vetted by the Prime Minister to ensure cooperative silence. The Cabinet is the Supreme Committee of Parliament, holding a whip hand over all the others.
Then what is the point of an Intelligence and Security Committee if it is merely an imprimatur of number 10 Downing Street?
That is a very good question, one which has challenged constitutional observers for decades. Quis custodiet ipsos custodes? I suppose it fools the public into thinking that wise monkeys are actively overseeing the activities of the security services when they are actually getting paid handsomely just to meet over brandy and cigars.
Why do backbench Eurosceptics not inquire into and complain about their levels of surveillance?
Because most are from the Tory right wing. Narcissists, Puritans or hypocrites who enjoy the limelight and so do not mind surveillance into their private lives unless they're having affairs, which the tabloid press could use to damage their careers. The government faces enormous opposition to welfare cuts and tax rises, but most MPs now favour the efficiency and convenience of a crypto-fascist police surveillance state without due process of law. No one ever complains about us opening their letters anymore, or harassment of their constituents, except that irritating woman from the Green Party.
The UK has the most liberal employment laws and the cheapest migrant labour in all of Western Europe. Manufacturers are not going to relocate to more expensive socialist France or Germany if trade deals can be negotiated from England's green and pleasant land.
If we leave the EU, then travel will become more difficult.
But that's what you want, isn't it? More border checks to keep out migrants.
More difficult for everyone, migrants and yuppies alike. We will have no influence over EU policy formation, especially foreign policy.
Tony Blair had a megalomaniac obsession with striding presidentially across the world stage. Conservative leader David Cameron seems to share this obsession, whether it be at a seemingly endless series of European conferences or promoting foreign policy adventures with EU backing. Ordinary voters might, at some stage, begin to suspect that the whole EU project is merely a coalescing of power for its own sake.
Political personalities are driven by ego.
So why are you really backing the campaign to remain?
A Brexit vote could precipitate a second Scottish independence referendum.
Scottish independence is inevitable once they learn to govern themselves. That is not your primary motive. So what is?
Is it not obvious to an experienced journalist such as yourself, familiar with the practice of media manipulation and spin?
I think so, but need you to confirm it.
If the result of the referendum is a vote to leave the European Union, then David Cameron will probably have to resign as Prime Minister and leader of the party.
If a vote to stay within the EU is by a narrow margin, then Tory Eurosceptics may force a leadership contest anyway.
There are several possible permutations, but one likely outcome is a leadership contest before the end of the year. If Dave does not resign, then he could be opposed by Boris. If he does, then a three-way contest between Boris, George and myself will occur.
Why do you think that campaigning to remain in the EU best positions you for a leadership contest?
Boris is the established leader of the plot to usurp Dave in the Conservative Party, whereas I am in the line of natural succession just behind George. If a Brexit occurs, then George will be almost as seriously damaged as Dave, leaving me, whom everyone knows is really a Thatcherite Eurosceptic at heart, as the most credible cabinet minister, opposing the Boris bid for power.
But Boris has populist charisma, whereas you have the chilling demeanour of a revenant cyborg zombie, made up to star in a horror film. You're perfectly cast as a demoniacal Home Secretary, but you are very unlikely to win a leadership contest.
Boris is a buffoon who may be popular with journalists, but is regarded with suspicion within the parliamentary party, much like Churchill in the wilderness. I am an heir to Margaret Thatcher, and would preside over a new era of humourless hang-'em and flog-'em Tory values with an iron fist and a velvet glove, in splendid isolation from the continent. Once we're out of the EU, we can have capital punishment debates in the Commons again, cheered on by the tabloid press.
The Work and Pension Secretary has recently resigned in protest at proposed cuts to welfare for disabled people. He is a Eurosceptic and a former leader of the party. Could he be positioning himself as a compassionate alternative to Boris, or Medusa, at the Conservative Party Monster Mash?
He tried once and failed.
As did Hillary Clinton, but like her, he never actually lost a general election.
The political harakiri of the Liberal Democrats under Nick Clegg has left a large niche for someone to fill, though I'm not sure that IDS fits the bill as a one-nation caring Conservative leader.
Formative experiences can change a political outlook. The Liberal Gladstone started out as a Tory. Winston Churchill switched from Tory to Liberal and back again.
But the last bold Prime Minister of the United Kingdom served whilst Eisenhower was President of the United States in the early 1950s. Neil Kinnock and William Hague might have done better with a full head of hair. IDS was replaced as leader of the Conservative Party before the 2005 general election by the slightly less follically challenged Michael Howard.
Why would you seek to recruit me? Your best strategy would be to stay out of the debate until the referendum is over. Your job is to manage the covert aspect of the aptly titled Project Fear. The implied threat of police video surveillance in the homes of those who campaign for a Brexit. If you were to campaign openly as a sceptic, you would have to authorise surveillance against yourself, which would be a conflict of interest requiring you to resign. The Prime Minister would then have to appoint a new pro-EU Home Secretary, the one cabinet position which cannot be occupied by a sceptic, to authorise surveillance operations against the other sceptics. You have no choice but to be seen campaigning to remain within the EU, if you want to continue as Home Secretary now, and hedge your bets for the future, just in case the Prime Minister survives.
Touché. But that is strictly off the record in your BBC News reporting. If truth be known, I don't think a Brexit will change anything. My Eurosceptic colleagues, on recovering from their champagne hangovers, will be hugely disappointed by the political reality. Dave will cling to power regardless, with his truculent style and slick PR presentations. We'll continue to travel and trade as before, share our productive fishing grounds with Spanish trawlers, subsidise French farmers, and donate billions to the expense account of Eurocrats in Brussels and Strasbourg. Best of all, I will continue to exercise arbitrary power from the Home Office, enhance the political surveillance state, and arrest whoever I want across Europe. No need to get jealous. But Der Spiegel has a very attractive new political editor whom I am planning to brief in this bunker after the referendum, whatever the outcome.